Let me introduce myself. My name is Poswiata, and I am clinical manager in EGZOTech company, and having wonderful clinical team also with great physiotherapists out there. And today I want to talk with you about the motor learning and motor control in regards to new technologies, robotics, and how can we use those in the clinical setting, and share some experience here from physios in Poland. Okay, great. So I guess we can start slowly. So let me share my screen and share today's presentation and start with with the beginning. Also, you can let me know if you can see the presentation, if everything is fine, and if we are ready to start. Good. Yeah, everyone sees the presentation? Let me know on chat, and we will be starting in a second. Okay, perfect. Yeah, good to know that everything is perfect. You can write down also what country are you from, because I see some nice last names that can be from far, far away, which is great, obviously. All right. Oh, Latvia is on. Great. All right. So let's start today's meeting in regards to motor learning and how this supports the process of neurorehabilitation, how robotics with EMG do that. So obviously the motor control is a huge topic, and this is something that we're not going to discuss today as a whole, but we're just going to jump real quickly to some definition of motor control, motor learning. So as you know, the motor control is the ability to regulate or direct the mechanism essential to movement. And obviously, we know that the central nervous system is responsible to organize all those tiny or big muscles and coordinate this all in functional movement. And in regards to motor learning, we usually say that it's all about skill acquisition, but also to maintaining this skill, right? So we only talk about the motor learning if we see that with the patient, we're not starting over and over again where we have left off. When we see that he really understands what to do and he's improving during one session, but this needs to be taken to another sessions, and the process needs to be there. And with the skill acquisition is the ability to just identify this appropriate movement goal in the context, select the right action, and during the state of the body, and execute that action with accuracy and precision. And the skill needs to be maintained during changing conditioning, right? This is something that we aim for with our patients to transfer this also to their regular everyday life. And in rehabilitation, we work with the assumption that practice makes perfect, and the training leads to improvement of the skills. For example, after the stroke. So basing on this and having that in mind, we talk about 3 stages of motor learning. So the first one is the cognitive state, when we describe what to do to our patient, right? And this is a stage where there's a lot of talking, or we can really use some feedback. And this is the stage where we are using all those great devices that are there on the market with the biofeedback, and really help our patient understand what muscle to use, how, like what to do, right? So and then there is this another stage when the patient already knows what to do, but just needs to more upgrade the skill, right? So all those adjustments, how the skill is performed, this will be that stage. And in this stage, the feedback is, there's less feedback out there. So the patient really needs to focus on how to improve in that skill. And then there is the third stage, autonomous stage, where we all want to be, right? We want to do two things at the same time. At the beginning, when we are learning how to drive, that's the only thing we can focus on. And then, unfortunately, we're able to do more things during driving, right? But that just means that we got to another stage, to the autonomous stage with that skill, and then we can perform it without even paying a lot of attention. And I put a picture of a patient on the left-hand side. It's a patient working on the pelvic floor. And it's also a great example of the motor learning and those three stages. Because with the pelvic floor, we use those internal electrodes to tell the patient how to contract the muscle, right? So what to do with those muscles. And the patient really needs to understand what's going on, right? To really feel what is the pelvic floor and contract it. And then she sees that on the screen that, yes, I'm doing the right thing. But then we go to another stage where we want to improve that contraction. We want to make it longer or quicker or relaxed in the middle, right? So we teach a patient to improve that skill. And then there is this third stage where we don't really want our patient to think about the pelvic floor. For example, when she sneezes or when she grabs something heavy, those muscles need to automatically contract and help her with the movement. And yeah, and with the surface EMG as a feedback here, that works quite good. And then there's always concern how to teach your patient, right? Should we start with the whole movement right away? Should we divide that into section? How to divide this into the sections? So obviously it depends, but we can divide it to two separate things. First of all, if it's a simple task or is a high complexity task. The high complexity task, we will probably try to cut into the pieces, not really artificially, but just in a, you know, we need to think how to cut this movement into parts. So first the patient will try to work in that particular part, improve, and then obviously at the end, we want to take all those parts together and make it as the whole movement. And as study says, you know, this is like reaching to grasp a cup, and it may then to be divided practice and then combined for the whole practice. And because there are clearly seen segments that can be divided and then put together as whole. Great. So there are ways of simplifying the task. So one is already the one that I mentioned, which is the task that we are actually putting it into the segments and have it as a part. The second one is simplification, but we are reducing the different part of the task. And then there is a way of working in the part practice as a fractionization, which means that, for example, when we are playing the guitar, we are first practicing the right hand side, and then we also practice the left hand, and then we put it all together. And the last but not least thing to discuss is true recovery, and there is compensation. So with the true recovery in the rehabilitation, we will try to get to those undamaged brain regions that and recruit them and generate the same commands to the muscles and use the same muscles as we did before the injury. And then also like unmask those pre-existing cortical connections. And this is also something that we are really trying to do with our robot with the Luna EMG. Obviously, there will be some compensation, and surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, we should actually train both true recovery and compensation, but we should not start with the compensation. We should not promote the compensation and try not to teach patients the wrong movement, right? Because patients without the physiotherapy will mostly go with the compensation. So that's our true goal, to try to avoid as much of that as possible. Okay, and the role of EMG-triggered robotic and EMG in the motor learning. This is something that we should focus today. First of all, as the study shows, robotics are ideal means of training for severely affected patients, where the external assistance support may overcome the problems with the muscle weakness, right? So first of all, this is why we need robotics, so the patient is able to move in general, right? Where the muscle, where's problem with the muscle weakness. Okay, and then there is task-specific options and the single joint robotic exercises, right? And the relation between them. Study also shows that patient needs to have the tool to successfully complete a particular task-oriented activity, right? So we need to give the patient the muscle force, the range of motion. So there is a portion of exercise that we are really focusing on task-specific practice, and then there is a portion that we give the patient the tool to be able to be successful in those task-specific practices. And that's where the single joint robotic exercises come in place as well. And our today star, EMG-triggered robotic movement, because that's mostly what we are using in our robotic systems. That's the learning principle which we use here is the repetition and sensomotor integration. So what's going on? The patient is trying to be active, and then the robot is assisting with the movement. And so the patient really feels that flexion and extension, all those information from proprioceptors, and we really influence the motor control and motor cortex in this particular way. And we can recruit at all those alternative motor pathways as well, and work towards recovery after the stroke, for example. And all of that is based on the sensory integration theory, which states that the sensory input from the movement of the affected limb directly influence subsequent motor output. And then there are studies obviously about the robotics as well, and that this assistance, this physical assistance from the robot, and the feedback, auditory feedback about the successful completion of the task are considered important elements for voluntary controlled improvement with practice. Okay, and then there is how are we working in practice with that? So you can see on the video that the patient has EMG electrodes. So those electrodes are reading the signal from the muscles, and wherever the patient is trying to make a move, the device is assisting with the movement. In addition, here we see that the patient looks in the mirror to watch how the leg is moving. This patient here is actually almost, there's no movement in the lower limb in her regular life. She is doing this kind of movement thanks to the robotic. Also, the EMG triggered movement is the best approach in some stages of the rehabilitation. And I would say whatever we are talking about the muscle force, and we have some activity in the muscle, and then we go up to third level of the our manual muscle testing, right? Lovett scale or MRC. We see that on those levels, the robotic assistant is and the best or the most useful. And then from the third to fifth, the active resistive exercises seem quite good. And our device also has the active resistive exercises, but it's well known from the active assistive via EMG. Okay. And about the compensation, I already started to talking about it, but basically the thing is that if the patient does not have sufficient muscle force, coordination, range of motion, and he will start task-specific training or CIMT training, it will lead to a lot of the compensation. And at the end, to the bad movement pattern. So what we do, we add the device into the rehabilitation path to increase the muscle strength, to increase range of motion, and to increase the coordination between the muscles. And to do that, we actually came up with some new programs that were designed with the physiotherapists who like really wanted to have them there, and we're gonna show them today as well. And the feedback that I already mentioned as well is the crucial part from the robotics, from the new technologies. And it's because the neurological patient needs to rely on something more than its own sensory system, right? Because we know there are some disruptions, it can be some issues with the sensory, and the patient just do not sense it, do not trust it. So then we give him more of the feedback, and it will be the knowledge of the results from the training, the knowledge of the performance during the training, just the summary feedback or some average feedback that he was getting during the trials. And we know that because the all that process, the neurological rehabilitation is quite long, this is something that keeps them going, right? Because it's not like they're going to walk tomorrow. It will take time. So just showing them all those numbers and showing it on the screen and motivate them, like, see, yesterday you had this, today you had that. So that's improvement. So this is something that motivates them as well. And in the robotic devices in Luna EMG that we are working with, there is EMG biofeedback, and there's a position and time biofeedback. And we say that it's the type of analytical biofeedback. And here, example of the information that you can get from EMG, for example. Like when you look at the movement, it's not really bad, right? It seems symmetrical. It seems okay. Then we can clearly see that there is twice that much activity of the red channel, which is the right-hand side, comparing to the left channel. So there is some hyperactivity on this side, and this might lead to some symptoms, and in that case was that as well. So this is something that we can really analyze the performance and also get the feedback for the patient, for us, how to do it better, where to relax, where to activate it even more. Okay. And then we have the games, which is also a part of the biofeedback. Since for some patients, just the lines or the simple biofeedback will be perfect because it's not too much information at the same time. Then for some patients, it will be obviously for the longer term boring. So we add the games. And we really want to engage the patient and make him or her, be satisfied and motivated. So just summarizing that, the linkage from robotics to the motor learning, we see this in the segmentation of the movement. So really made it to make it more simple, so the patient are not frustrated that they cannot right away reach for the cup, but they will see that they can make really with the assistance of the robot some movements, and it will make them go further. We also are reducing the degrees of freedom. So at the beginning, it's not that complicated. There are not that many ways to perform the movement. We just simplified it. Obviously, we are talking about the motivation of the patient and providing various feedback for them. For example, the clinic from Schweinfurt point out also some other things in regards to Luna EMG training, that from their perspective, besides the external biofeedback, they also see this intensive activity of the patient, all those repetition, the positive reinforcements, and performance limits, right? That they really can push their patient further, and with the help of the device, it's actually possible to do that. Right. And let me show you some of the example of the trainings. So EMG biofeedback training. Here in Katowice, we have this clinic that is working, for example, with amputee patients. And they are also using our device with the EMG to train those patients, because both of those patients that you can see here were actually getting ready to receive the prosthesis, which is guided with the EMG. So first they were training on Luna, and with all those documentation from the device that they are actually doing quite good with the EMG biofeedback and things like that, they went to the court, to the insurance, and they just asked for this kind of prosthesis, and it was bought to them. And then we have one-channel EMG-triggered assisted movement that I already showed you on the first patient was lying on the table. And here you can see there is a patient with some paresis of the peripheral nerves. And the clinic here is using EMG device in a very nice and creative way. The patient, when he entered the clinic, he was also almost flaccid. He could not walk. He only used the wheelchair. And here is a training after 2 months. This is his almost the last training. And here he is activating his rectus femoris for working with the flexion. And now he is working with the tibialis anterior, with his foot. So all those parts of the walking, he is first trying to go with Luna on that. So here you can see that they put the walking to parts, and we're trying to work on Luna first, and then actually improved. And then right now the patient is able to walk with only one crutch. So yeah, and here you can see some reports after the training. Patient after stroke, working on his foot drop, also in lying position this time, and with the feedback on the screen. This is one-channel EMG electromyography. And the girl that I've shown you at the beginning, she was after a car accident and injured her spinal cord. And she was the one that really also pointed out to us that with Luna, it was a motor learning, because she, thanks to the device, she was able to recognize which muscle to use to perform the movement. So this is at the beginning, she was also flaccid. This is after 3 months of the training. And she was able to hold the leg but this was after 3 months of the training. Before I showed you how she was working in the lying, but she was also working in the sitting position, also towards extension, and this led her to better outcomes. So this is her after another month of training. She was able to fully extend the leg. She was able to control that leg. So obviously there was neuroplasticity going on, but for her, the first step was to understand what to do, since she had a limited sensory feedback from her body itself. And then we came up with the 2-channel EMG trigger assisted movement, and this is something we're really proud of, and we see that you are working with that very well and you really like this approach. And we came up with 3 trainings. First training is the antagonist mode. It's a training where we want to put the electrodes on the antagonist muscles. So here you see how the electrodes are being put together with the cables, and then we put them on the muscles. Electrodes we usually put next to each other, and to see the activity of the muscle. And here is the one on the biceps, and then the second one goes for the triceps. And the goal of the training is to contract the one muscle, so for example biceps, but at the same time relax the antagonist to perform, for example, flexion and extension. So here we set, we are unweighting the limb, and then we are setting the range of motion for the limb. We usually do that, to limit the range of motion for the patient to work in. We are choosing both channels and deciding which one is responsible for which action. We are calibrating this signal for both channels, so we see how much activity there is from the patient. And whatever the patient is going above one threshold line, for example, with the red channel, but keeping the blue channel low underneath the blue line, then the extension goes one way. When it's opposite, then it goes another way. So only in those conditions, the extension will move, so the patient gets clear feedback if he or she was able to correctly work with the muscle. And the physios who are working with Luna are really creative. So you cannot only use it for an elbow, but for example, in this clinic, they use it for one side of the trunk and then the other side of the trunk. So wherever the patient is active on one side, the steering wheel goes one way. If it's active on another one, then the steering wheel goes to another direction. So as you can see, this is just a tool, but you as a physio can decide if you can work on the trunk or on the limbs, whatever is your goal. And then there is a second one, we call it antagonist mode, that we put electrodes on the muscles that are actually agonists. So in this example, we are using the deltoideus muscle, and we are using the trunk muscles, because why not? And that means that we will have to activate both channels for the extension to actively move, right? So that means that in this program, the patient needs to activate the trunk, needs to activate the limb, and relax the limb so it will go down, right? So we are training so the patient is active in the trunk and in the limb. And we are using the same program, just using the different way of using the same program, but just for agonist muscles. And we are also calibrating, and whatever a patient now he needs to or she needs to be over both lines, so the extension will go up, and then at least one channel needs to relax, so so it will go down. So this is one of the most favorite extension when you're working with the shoulder extension, really popular after the stroke. So you can work like that, and then you know that the patient is active into the trunk and into the extension and the arm. Okay. And then let's an example of that. This is actually a patient that after the stroke, and here we were working on the agonist, so two muscles had to be active in order to flex the foot. So it's also interesting, and it was also part of the motor learning before walking. So really training the components of walking and then put it all together to walk. And relaxation mode, that's the last one that we have implemented lately. It's the one that we need to activate one muscle, but the other one should stay relaxed the whole time. So for example, as here, we put it on the deltoideus, and for the trapezius to keep it relaxed, right? So this is how we can avoid the compensation, because we will show the patient, please don't go so high with your arm, and it will actually be a line on the screen, then how to relax, and then the extension will go up, will go down. And on the software, you can see it's all the same settings. We are setting the range of motion, we are choosing the channel, deciding which program to use, in which way, which direction, and then we start. Always we also perform calibration, and then whenever we are ready to go, patient is calibrating the device, and it's the exercise can start. So actually, you know, just starting the device and setting it all in the software is not that it's very quick. And setting the patient is also very quick. It's very simple. So then when the robotics really makes sense, where you can really put the patient on, take care of another patient, and just look with your eyes if everything is fine. But if you set the condition when the patient needs to work with, then you're all good. Yeah, as an example, you can see how that's probably pretty common, how the stroke patients are compensating without the device, and how he is relaxed, whatever it is unweighted, and when we are using those antagonist, agonist relaxation modes to really keep those compensations controlled. And at the end, I always like to show everyone, whoever works with the Luna devices. Obviously, I cannot put here all 130 robots already supporting physios all over the world, but it's always good to see how you are using the tool, because again, it's not something that it's forcing you to work in one way or another. Whatever you have a goal with your patient, and you know, there's only you with the patient, and you should do so much, and there are so many patients, then this is this little helper that can help you out. Will definitely not be tired, and will do all those repetitions with the patient. And so you can promote neuroplasticity, you can work both the motor learning and really go with the day and not be that tired, right? The technology is always there to support us, not giving us solutions that we don't need. All right, so that will be all for today in terms of the presentation. Thank you so much for your attention. And now, if you have any more questions, please write down it in the question and answer, and I will try to use the time we have left to answer some of those. Okay. So please put it into the Q&A section. I will also look at the chat if there's anything here. I'm glad that we have people from Thailand. I guess it's quite late in Thailand, I believe. All right. Any questions? I don't see any questions out here at this time. Hopefully because it was so simple and understandable. Okay. You can, if there's anything coming to your mind and you would like to, discuss it, or okay, there's a question. How much time per session for one patient? Well, it definitely depends on the way of working with the patient in each clinic. In some clinic, they are working for 1 hour with the device, but it does not mean that you work with one extension for 1 hour. Basically, you are working with all kinds of extension, and we have there the shoulder, the elbow, the wrist, the knee, the foot extension, the steering wheel. All those ideas during this 1 hour can be performed. So that's one. And this is, for example, in this private clinic here in Katowice, they are charging for one patient for 1 hour. There are clinics, for example, who have 4 devices, and then they are working it also, whatever they need to cover more patients at one time, they put the patient on the Luna, sometimes for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, also to make it more interesting, to motivate the patient, right? So it's really up to the clinic, how do they use it. The device is also on the wheel, so you could actually bring it to the patient's bed and work a little bit with patient in bed. So it depends on the system in the clinic. And I was also mentioning that if you would like to try the device in your clinic and see if there's a room for it in terms of, is it really helping with your patient, then you can write down to us on the email webinar@exotech.com, and we will try to arrange some trial for you or answer more of your questions. Okay, and there was a question about the younger after crash. What was the intensity of the therapies during the 15 months? 1 hour a day or a week? Or thank you. So that was actually, she was working twice a week for 2 hours. So that was her schedule. Yeah. And well, it took time. I know it took time, but it was spinal cord injury and it could be not improving at all. Whether Luna can be used for training small muscles in the hand. Not with the extensions, because there is no extensions for the small muscle or for the fingers. But if you would use just the EMG with electrodes out there, and smaller size, or actually what we do, we just cut around to those bigger ones sometimes, and it just works fine. So if the small muscles can be detected whenever they are more on the surface than really deep, then you can actually use that as a biofeedback, right? So you could do that again, but not with extension. For extension for the fingers, then it would have to be a totally different device, which small motors and things like that. So that's if you want to really use robotics for the fingers, for example. So yeah. yeah, because sometimes people are using, even EMG for training the facial muscles. Then they also use the small electrodes, and then this is how it goes. Okay, great. So again, if after the webinar you will think, oh well, I'm wondering about this or that, please write down. We will try to contact with you, and we will try to arrange the trial for you. You can also think about renting just device for some time, just to see how it improves work in your clinic, because we all are facing the same problems, I think, in Europe and all over the world, that there is so many different people to be treated, and not that many physios, and physios are being overwhelmed with work, being tired. So and since the neuroplasticity say we should really repeat the same movements and all of that, yeah, let's have this robotic helping hand help us, and let's go from there. Perfect. There's one more question. I was just about to finish, but okay, let's do one last one. Could you please suggest about research that described the effect of Luna in patients with stroke? Well, I could recommend you our own research that we performed in Poland, and we focused on the lower limbs. We had a group of patients after stroke, 30 patients in the control group, 30 patients in the robotic group, and the only difference was that the robotic group had half hour of Luna instead of some other activities, because the treatment time was the same. And what we noticed definitely was that the spasticity was lower in the robotic group. It really went down very nice because of those constant repetition of the movement, some passive exercises, because with the robot you can go passive exercises, so just the robot is doing it, EMG activity exercises, so whatever we were discussing today, resistance exercises, so you can apply very small resistance and then make it higher with each session, and with the games and everything. So yeah, so we've seen the improvement in the robotic group, and we published that lately, so we can send this out to you. Yeah, and we are starting new researchers this year as well. If you also maybe there are some researchers today with us, also let me know. We are happy to collaborate. There is so many things still to discover, to see how can we perform better, because we already have the technology, but now the main question is how to use the technology the best way possible to improve our patients and help them regain the movement and go back to the life they had, or try to go back to the society. Yeah, so that'll be, and there are obviously a lot of research in regards to EMG, in regards to robotic, and this is all out there in PubMed, that it's easy to reach out. And Gabriela asked also, does this device require a lot of space? Not really. It really requires the space that you have for like a standing physio, right? Because it's on the wheels. And so it's just that. Unless you want to lay down your patient on the bed, then you just the space of the bed. So I don't know if you can see it on the left-hand side. It stays here, and plus the bed or the chair, that you can get the chair with it as well. So just the space of the device and the chair or a bed. Yeah, but Gabriela, reach out through email. We will send you some more information, how to try it in your clinic. Perfect. I think. Thank you so much for being today with me today. It was such a nice afternoon here in Poland. Hope you got some new information from the technology in rehabilitation. We're getting there. We want to support physios. We will never replace physios. It's impossible, but we really want to support them, give them the tools to make their life easier, and give the tools to patients to also get better and better results. And yeah, so it's a win-win. All right, thank you so much. Have a wonderful afternoon and see you next time on our next webinars. Bye-bye.